Hello, this is Trey Olds. Welcome to Actors of the Past.
Manuel Antonio Rodolfo Quinn and Haka was born on April 21st, 1915, in Chihuahua City, Mexico. Mr. Quinn's first film role was in 1936's The Milky Way. His other film roles include Zorba the Greek in 1964, Lion of the Desert in 1981, Lawrence of Arabia in 1962, The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1956, and The Last Action Hero in 1996. Besides being an actor, Mr. Quinn was also a writer, painter, director, and sculptor. Now join us when I talk to Ryan Quinn, the youngest of Mr. Quinn's children, where he shares his experiences and stories of his father. Well, let's get started. First, just tell me and my audience about yourself and about your father.
Well, my father was the first Mexican actor to win an Academy Award, and he actually won 2 Academy Awards in the span of 4 or 5 years in the 50s, and he's known around the world for playing different nationalities, different characters. And I am the last child of his 13th child.
Wow.
I was born in 1996. He was 81 years old, and he had me and my sister with my mother, Catherine.
Mm-hmm. And did you follow his footsteps? And are you involved in the industry in any way?
I did go to school for video production or for media production, so I'm currently pursuing that. I graduated in 2018 from Emerson College with a degree in media production. But no, I've tried acting. I'm not a great actor. Contrary to what a lot of people believe, it's a lot more difficult than it looks.
Yeah, I'm a theater actor besides doing the radio show and stuff. My background is theater, and
Okay.
I enjoy doing that very much, but I like radio more, I guess, because you don't have to be in front of a live audience or show your face. It's just your voice. You can work a lot with your voice.
Right. Well, you definitely have a great personality for it.
Thank you. I have a few questions about your father. He was one of my favorite actors, a great actor in his time, and he's done so many movies: Zorba the Greek, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Last Action Hero. So many great films, and his career lasted over a few decades, from the early 40s to the late, until he passed away, and not only
Pretty
as
much up until the year he passed away, yeah.
Yeah.
I even released a song on vinyl.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So he did it all. He did it all.
Yeah, it really, the definition of a Renaissance man, I'm told all the time.
Yeah. Do you have any fond memories of your father? That you can share?
When he passed, I was about 4 years old, so I don't remember too much. Any memories I have, I've come to believe are just kind of made up from stories that I've heard. I've lived my whole life hearing so many stories about my father, and despite not living with him for most of my life, I like to think that I actually know him more than a lot of people actually get to know their parents, because of the just sheer amount of work that he left behind. He wrote 2 memoirs. He wrote a screenplay. He did countless interviews, over 200 films. So I'm just delighted every time I watch him and on screen and get to read his words. And we have a whole library of sketchbooks that he kept. So I really feel like, even though I don't have too many memories, like I, got to get to know him pretty well. But besides all the stories I've heard and read, the one memory that does stick out that I undoubtedly have is when I was about 4 years old. He would, even though he was 86 years old, he would play with me and my sister like he was in his 40s, and sometimes he would get down on his knees and give me a napkin, and I'd pretend I was a matador, and he would pretend he was a bull. So he'd charge at me on his knees, and I'd pull the napkin away and jump on his back. So you might have seen it or heard it in interviews, but he was a very childish person. He loved to play, and he was just so full of energy, even in his 80s.
Yeah, definitely. I've watched a lot of interviews, especially in his older years, and he still seems energetic, very energetic and full of life.
Well, he'd go on walks with me and my family, me and my mother and my sister. We'd go on walks, and when I was just an infant, he and my mother did the Camino de Santiago in northern Spain, and for someone at that age, you wouldn't think that that's possible. And then when around our house in Rhode Island, he would even take a machete and cut a pathway through the woods, while my mother carried me and my sister. So very active, and he loved to bicycle ride. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I guess that's part of his heritage. He was half Mexican, half Irish, and Mexicans, they're very energetic, and he seemed to have that
and
drive.
Hardworking.
Yeah, hardworking. Yeah.
Yeah. He besides loving to play and experience life to the fullest, he also never stopped working. Whether it was on films or sculpture or painting. The way that my mom describes his work rigor was, he every moment he was either painting or reading or sculpting. He had to be doing something.
Yeah, definitely, and he never stopped working. It seemed he stopped working until the year he passed away. He was working and
Correct.
Working. Yeah. Do you have a favorite film he's done? Do you have a favorite film?
My favorite film has to be, I haven't seen it in a while, but Walk in the Clouds and Secret of Santa Victoria. Those were two of my favorites. And then I recently watched for the first time Last Train to Gun Hill with Kirk Douglas, and that was a phenomenal film. I couldn't believe that I hadn't seen that before, but such a great film.
Yeah, definitely.
And you mentioned that your favorite film is with him was Hunchback of Notre Dame, where he played Quasimodo. And most people now don't know that he played Quasimodo, but there's actually a funny story from that. When he actually went to, before he went to, I believe they were shooting it in Italy, and he flew out there to go shoot the film. And when he got out there, he had a sty in his eye, and he thought he had an infection, or so he saw countless doctors. He actually was barred in his hotel room for weeks, and they put the film on hold, while he figured out what was wrong. And finally a doctor told him, there's nothing wrong with you. You're actually, have you considered that maybe you're taking on the role of Quasimodo, and so you've taken on this deformation, and that was very liberating for him. So that also speaks to the type of actor that he was. I know character actor is or method actor is a very common term or popular term now. And I don't know if he saw it as that, but he really, it just kind of speaks to how deep he got into the role. That he also did immense research for every single role, and really took on whatever character he was playing, which is probably why people believed him so well as all these different characters.
Definitely. He was that type of actor that took into account of that character and made that character believable, and he became that character with immense research and study. And
I mean, he would ask questions about the character that no one would ever think to ask. He'd ask, does the character, does this person believe in God? What God does he believe in? What are his views on sex and politics? Things that didn't even come up in the film, but things that really all came together to bring this character to life.
Definitely, and he did films far out of the American cinema. He did international films. He did Spanish, Italian. He was out there, with many different genres of international cinema.
Oh yeah. He worked on a film, La Strada, with Federico Fellini.
Mm-hmm.
One of the greatest directors of all time. And then he also worked with Spike Lee in Jungle Fever.
Mm-hmm.
So, two great directors from totally different eras.
Definitely. And that's great, because he was an actor of many different eras. He did so many films that were in different eras that reached out to different generations, like in the 90s, he was the bad guy in The Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And,
certainly.
And that was kind of my generation, a little bit before my time, but, I...
But yeah, I mean, most people, it's interesting because, most people under the age of 50 don't remember the name Anthony Quinn. But the people who do, really, really remember him. And you're right, he played different, a lot of different roles in for different generations. He was a mobster. He was an Arab leader. He was, a Greek, the epitome of a Greek man. So he definitely played so many different, not only different roles for different generations, but nationalities too. I have people come up to me even today and say, no, he was Arab, or he was Greek, or he was Italian, and I'll tell them, no, he was actually Mexican, and they'll insist that he was actually whatever nationality that he made them believe he was.
Definitely. I read something one time. A lot of people thought he was Greek, but in fact he was half Mexican, half Irish, And,
Correct.
But that has to be a compliment, because he portrays that so well, as an actor, and people think that.
Oh, it's one of the greatest compliments, I think. There's one one thing I was told when I was in school, when I was studying production design in a class, and the teacher said, if you can make the production design so good that nobody notices the production design, then you've done your job really well. If people notice if people can pick out, what you're doing or what you're giving to the film, and they really notice it while they're watching the film, then maybe it's not so good. But if you do your job really well, then they won't even notice that the extent of the production design. They'll just be so enveloped in the film, and I think that rings true with actors as well. If they're playing the part well, nobody's going to think about how well they're acting. They're just going to be enveloped in the story.
Definitely. They just look at the character and they kind of forget it's an actor portraying the character,
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. And that's more interesting in theater than in film, I think, because theater is just more surreal and interesting because you have the audience in the same room with you, and...
Oh, it's such, yeah. I mean, that's one of the blessings of film is that, they're able to really bring you fully into the world, whereas theater, it requires a bit more creative solutions and suspension of disbelief in some cases.
Definitely. And your father, I'm sure, had, as all the actors have went through challenges. It's not a perfect job. I'm sure he went through challenges, and I read something because when he first came to America, they weren't very welcoming for Latin Americans or Mexicans, and he faced a lot of racism and criticism because of who he was.
It was beyond. He was fairly lucky because he still held a pretty good Irish resemblance. So he was still pretty. He looked Caucasian, but at that time that he started acting and that he was raised in Los Angeles in Southern California. They had signs outside of restaurants that said no dogs, no blacks, no Mexicans. So racist beyond, I think, what you or I probably know.
Yeah, definitely. And but he persevered. He was probably one of the most successful actors, and it seemed like he never gave up.
Oh no, he definitely never gave up in anything that he did. He fought with life. Like you were saying, nothing really was easy. From an outside perspective or at a glance, it might seem glamorous, but there, just like everyone faces, he definitely faced his fair share of trouble and definitely had to fight with life to get the things that he wanted, and he fought hard. Definitely.
Yeah, I watched a lot of interviews for my research on this episode, and he said he was a very simple man. A lot of people thought he was a wealthy man, but he really wasn't. He lived a fairly simple life and very artistic life, painting and sculpting, and he seemed like a very interesting man.
His best friends weren't other famous actors, so he was always good acquaintance with some great actors. But his best friends were and the people he loved most were just his family.
Mm-hmm.
His family and just people that he really loved being around. So he wasn't superficial, and I mean, having the background that he did, having grown up in pretty great poverty, he definitely took that with him his whole life and didn't let his success get to his head, almost to the extent where it was really hard for him to even accept how far he had come. He often really thought that he still had a lot more to go. He had a lot more to do. He never felt like he had accomplished. He felt like there was always something more to accomplish.
Well, Ryan, thank you very much for letting me talk to you. And as I said, I was a fan of your father's work, and my job with this little documentary is to ensure that his legacy lives on, share it to other generations and generations to come. So I thank you for being a part of it.
I applaud you for making this show, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me and put this episode together about my father. It's always great to have more research and stories told about him. If anyone wants to learn more, anyone can go visit AnthonyQuinn.com and follow the effort that my mom has made, the lifelong effort that my mom has made to preserving his legacy through his art and his writings and the works that he collected. And she continues every day to do that, and she also has been running a nonprofit organization called the Anthony Quinn Foundation since 2007, and giving scholarships to high school kids since 2011 or 2010, and so she continues to preserve his legacy. So it's commonly said that a person dies two times. When they actually pass away, when they leave this physical world, and the last time someone remembers their name or utters their name. And so there are countless books and the history of my father in cinema. I imagine as long as humanity exists and people study the history of cinema, he will exist, and that's greater than anyone could wish. But yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Ryan. Join us when I talk to Mr. Quinn's widow, Miss Catherine Quinn.
How you became acquainted with Mr. Quinn for my audience as a beginner.
Okay. As a beginner, well, my meeting him was a complete accident, as most of the best things in life happen by accident. I was just about a little over a year out of college, and I had traveled to Italy to work for a year. And when I went back to New York, where I lived, I was looking for a job, and my kind of focus was in political science, but there wasn't a lot out there in that career field at the time. And I had an uncle who was very close to me, who was a tennis professional who had came to say hello after he hadn't seen me for a year, and was talking about meeting or playing tennis with someone who worked for Anthony Quinn. And he said, by the way, he's looking for an assistant. And I have to admit, shamefully, that I didn't really know anything about Anthony Quinn. I was 23 years old at the time, and I wasn't a big movie person back then. Mm-hmm. I was, but just I wasn't very knowledgeable about a lot of Hollywood actors. And my uncle said, well, you must call and try and get this interview. And so I did, really because he insisted, and I didn't think that it was something that I was qualified for. But then I went, and I was greeted by this man who had a wonderful personality, and I said, I don't think I'm qualified for this job. And he said, right now, I need help organizing my life. And he was at the time painting, acting, writing, as he did most of his life. And I was shocked to find this man who was 70 years old, who was talking as if he was going to live forever. And it was so energizing and so interesting to be around someone like that. And so we worked together for a couple of weeks. That was kind of our deal. We would try and see how things went. And I helped him set up a painting studio in New York where he was going to start working on some new paintings and sculptures. And I was mostly at that time supposed to be in charge of his art production, because his career in the art world and the physical art world was really expanding. But it turned into, just managing everything for him, from his art life to his schedule and his travel and his, and just keeping track of all of his creative projects. And honestly, as I got to know him as a person, and then I got to know him as an actor, as an artist, my respect for him just grew exponentially. And it was really a wonderful, kind of evolving relationship that, as the story ends, we ended up together and having 2 children together. And I spent the next 17 years of my life working very closely with him and living with him, and never, ever getting tired of, and learning more every single day about what a genius he was and what a unique person he was. Sorry, that's a long story.
That's okay. The more the better, I enjoy long stories,
Good. Well, you have to cut with me. I don't have a lot of sound bites. I have long stories, but not a lot of sound bites.
Anthony Quinn's such a great actor, one of my favorites. He did so many wonderful films: Zorba the Greek, The Last Action Hero, Lawrence of Arabia, so many brilliant films. And he played...
what's amazing, Trey?
Go ahead.
What's amazing is that I in my travels around the world, both when I was with him and after he passed away, we would travel to, we could travel to Italy, we could travel to the Middle East, we could travel to Greece. Anywhere we went, people felt like he was their own. The Italians said he must be Italian. The Greeks thought he was Greek. The Mexicans, of course, because he was Mexican, took pride in him being Mexican. But I think that's because, first of all, he portrayed the characters that he portrayed so convincingly. And when he went to prepare for a role, he would spend time in those countries and live amongst the people, not try to live in a fancy hotel somewhere and then just go off to his shoot. He would get to know the culture and the people, and that's why he was able to make them feel like he was one of them. And not only that, he loved to do that. He loved learning and absorbing all of these cultures. And it's quite incredible to think that this young boy who came from Mexico, his mother brought him over when he was a few months old because they were trying to escape a war-torn country of Mexico, and they couldn't even afford to eat. There was so much violence and hunger, so she brought him to Texas, and they made their way up to California, and this wonderful story. But then his father passed away when he was only 11 years old. So here he was, an immigrant, at a time in the 20s and 30s when immigrants, it's always a challenge to be an immigrant in another country, but in California at the time, Mexico, there were so many Mexicans and people were resisting and discriminating against. And he believed in proving who he was for his own work. He wanted to be known. He didn't want to be felt sorry for ever. He was so proud of everything he did, whether it was washing floors in an auto dealership, whether he was selling newspapers or preaching for Amy Semple McPherson in a choir. He took pride in everything he did, and as he got older, that always stayed with him. And when people would say, "Oh, well, you're the best Mexican American," he said, "I don't want to be known as the best Mexican. I want to be known as the best actor. I want to be known as the best art." He wanted to be recognized for his work, not for that hyphenated work. And I think that's something that's sometimes missing in people, that they want a special dispensation because they are. And I don't know if you understand where I'm going with that. It's just that he loved when anybody took pride in what they did and respect. He would show up for work on time. He would never show up at the studio or at the set and say, "Oh, well, I'm tired, I need this," or he would be prepared with his lines, be prepared with his wardrobe, his makeup, whatever he needed to do. And he never stopped doing that, no matter how famous he became. And I think to approach every day of their work with that kind of pride and respect, and not take anything for granted, is really a quality that's hard to find these days.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of actors way back when in their generation, they were the top of their game, and they remained ambiguous, and it's hard to find in actors and individuals these days in my generation.
Mm-hmm. Well, they'll show up. They think they're divas, right? They show up for work. They want a car, or this kind of car, this kind of flower, this kind of soda in the dressing room. If this isn't there, well, then they throw a tantrum and then they leave. And he never did that. He was known. The only time a director would say he was difficult to work with was when he just really didn't agree with he couldn't. If a character was saying something that he didn't think that character would say, well, then he would argue his point. And but otherwise, he was a very professional person to work with. Always, at all times, it was the most important thing to him. And then he was also a wonderful dad. And I know you spoke to Ryan. I'm not sure if, what you talked about with my son, Ryan. But he, unfortunately, Ryan was only not quite 5 when his dad passed, but he worshiped his kids. And he even though he was in his 80s, he played with them every day and took bike rides and walks and let them paint in his studio with him. And it was his joy every day of his life to have young children, because for him, children were the source, of all creativity. They were the most natural, it just came intuitively. Felt like as kids got older, they became more and more closed, and to allow your creativity to flourish as you get older is the greatest challenge, because people become fearful. They don't want to take chances. They don't want to go outside their safe zone. And he loved being around kids because they didn't have those kind of barriers yet put up, when you're younger.
Definitely. And it's hard for people, like you said, as they get older, they face challenges and all that, and they become more closed up. I find I'm still a big kid at heart, I'm very creative, and yeah.
That's good. I try to be a kid all the time.
Definitely. Yeah, it keeps you young, definitely.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Definitely. And not only he was an actor, but he painting and artwork, that was his main passion in life as well. One of his main passions in life. He was a sculptor, a painter, a writer. And I've seen a lot of interviews with him. He said if he didn't have art, then his life would be gone. He had to have some part of art in his life.
That's right. Yeah, he surrounded himself every day with paintings and sculpture, and started drawing at a very young age, and later on painting and doing little sculptures, all while he was working on movies. It was just a tremendous passion of his, and almost something that he couldn't, like you said, he as he said, couldn't live without. It was just his everyday way of expressing himself,
Definitely. Do you have a favorite film he starred in? Do you have a favorite film of his?
I was telling Ryan one day, I said, I've learned more about his dad in the 20 years that he has been gone than I did when I was with him, because it's an endless source of creativity. And some of the movies, which I'm astounded, he used to say, because people would always ask him what his favorite was, and he would say, well, some of my favorite characters didn't come out that way on the screen, because when you're making movies, you're at the mercy of a director and other actors, and so sometimes the film in the end doesn't come out the way you think it was going to. So he would fall in love with his characters, and it didn't always become one of the favorite. I mean, I love when I think he had a great sense of humor. So like you say, and I just saw recently, I get Google alerts I put Anthony Quinn into Google alerts, and every other day there's some new movie that's being released on Blu-ray. And so I always buy them because I like to have the latest, because I have a lot of his films on VHS, which eventually probably won't last. I have a big library of his films on VHS, but every day now new ones are getting released they're remastering and so Last Action Hero was just reviewed by some movie website, and he said, it's not a popular opinion, but I think this was a great movie, and he goes into explaining why, and I thought it was so great. And he says Anthony Quinn was funny, and people didn't think of him as a humorous actor, but when he did play humorous roles, I thought he was hilarious, and that was really who he was. He was playful, and he remained a child, and I think that's why he was able to stay so young in his heart, to the very end, because he was so, always liked to play, he was so joyful about life. And so that's a long way to go about answering what my favorite movie is, but I like when he played those humorous roles, because I thought he had such a great sense of humor. So like The Secret of Santa Vittoria is a movie where he plays a drunken mayor. It's hilarious. What else? Even in Zorba the Greek, it's a very dark movie at times, but he has this great joy for life. And so I like those characters that reflect that joy that he had for life. And then on the other side, he took life very seriously many times. And, he, like I said, the respect that he treated each film and each role with. And so you could see that in some of the movies that people probably don't know so well. Like who said Lawrence of Arabia is very well known. He was very serious in that. And then like Lion of the Desert. And, he played a very serious role, but and it's a religious character that still today people in the Middle East, in Libya, they teach they teach it in history, and they use the film as part of the teaching because he did it so well. So I think his diversity in what he was able to portray, and some of the earlier films we portrayed Indians and cowboys and bad guys and good guys. So I think that's pretty admirable to have been able to do that much, you said diversity in his films, in his characters.
Definitely. He was one of those versatile actors, a method actor, an actor's actor. He one minute
Right.
would be a funny character, then the next serious character, and it was like a switch, and he portrayed all of that excellently. And my favorite film of his was, they don't really show it anymore. It's hard to find on DVD or Blu-ray too. It's The Hunchback of Notre Dame with Gina Lollobrigida and the French actor Alan Cuny, and Anthony was
that's wonderful.
Quasimodo. Yeah, that was an excellent film.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, he was wonderful in that. And that movie, when he made that movie, he was working in Paris. And I don't know if you ever read this story, but he got he was getting ready to film, and he got a kind of eczema on his face. Mm-hmm. And the director or the producers were like, "Oh my God, what's going on? We have to send you to see a doctor." And for weeks, they were trying to cure him of this eczema, and they were giving him all kinds of medication, and nothing would make it go away. And he went to this kind of, some people called it a quack doctor, but probably what, would be equivalent to like a naturopath these days, somebody who just healed naturally. And they said, well, of course you have that, deformation on your face because you are, you're internally becoming this, this deformed man, and you're becoming the character. And so he said, so just go wash your face with Evian water, and you understand that it's because you're becoming the character that you have to play, and you have to understand what it feels like to be deformed. And he thought that was miraculous. And sure enough, days later, it went away, and they were able to start the film. And Gina Lollobrigida, at the time, the producers were trying to get another actor to replace him because they couldn't get rid of this eczema, and she refused to do the picture without him, which is, he always appreciated that she wouldn't go on and do the movie with anyone else but him.
Definitely. Yeah, actors, it's supposed to be actors stick out for each other. It is a competition, but it's also your colleagues, It's...
Right. Yeah, so I hope I'm not taking up too much of your time with these long stories.
Oh, no, I enjoyed them very much. Very informative, and stories keep the world around. I enjoy long stories.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and so people like you, too, you've got to keep, some people forget, all of these people that came before them, and they think they started something new, and I constantly, even with music, when my kids were younger, and we'd be in the car going to school, and they'd, hear a song, and oh, this is my favorite new song. And I say, oh, well, that's just a remake of such and such. And they said, no way, this is a new song. And I said, no, you can look it up. And sure enough, it'd be, remakes and remakes and remakes. And it's always nice to appreciate, that everything in art, in life is just, it's like in the Bible, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is a derivative of something else. And so we build on the past, don't we? We learn from the past, we build on the past, we change the past, and we make things new again. And that's what art is, and it's new to fit each growing generation, but you have to honor those who came before you, always.
Absolutely.
And thanks for doing that. Thanks for doing that for my husband, because he deserves it.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Well, Miss Quinn, thank you very much for letting me talk to you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Trey. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Mr. Quinn's last film role was in 2002's Avenging Angelo. Mr. Quinn died on June 3rd, 2001 at the age of 86 in Boston, Massachusetts. Mr. Quinn's work will live on forever throughout the fans like myself and throughout the history of cinema. Special thanks to Mr. Ryan Quinn and Miss Kathy Quinn for helping me with this episode. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Actors of the Past. Good night, folks.